Welcome to my favorite vocab from the December SAT. If you want to go through this worksheet on your own, you can check the pinned comment down below, or the link is also in the description. Obviously, College Board does not post their answers to these questions, so all of these answers are what I will say, extremely confident about. But if you disagree with any of them, just throw your comment down below on what you think the answers are. Number 1. The blank of smartphone operating systems across the globe today reflects the strategic advantages of the Android platform that emerged through development and collaboration in the late 2000s. Android expanded swiftly and extensively, effectively displacing rival systems in regions such as Asia, Europe, and South America within a decade. Which choice completes the text with the most logical and precise word or phrase? So this one is definitely tough. ChatGPT is convinced the answer is C. Remember that ubiquity just means everywhere, and we see a lot of support for that. We see across the globe. We also see that it expanded swiftly and extensively. But I think there's two really good reasons why C is wrong. Number one, I think that A and C are dangerously similar. So remember that profuse means a lot of something. So the profusion of smartphone operating systems across the globe today would mean like the influx or explosion in popularity of smartphone operating systems across the globe, compared to the everywhereness of smartphone operating systems across the globe. So again, our first reason here would be that these two are really, really similar. Our second reason, and I think even more substantially than the first, is our context. So they're trying to tell us that the everywhereness of smartphones across the globe today reflects this strategy. What that would infer, and for a time frame we can just say decade, what that's inferring is that like a decade ago, there weren't many smartphones across the globe. But because of this strategy, they were able to spread smartphones across the globe where they weren't already there. So that directly conflicts with our end here where they say, not that Android is spreading into places where they weren't before. It is displacing or replacing rival operating systems that already existed. So that doesn't make sense that they're saying, oh, they are now everywhere today because of a strategy. They were already everywhere a decade ago. So it hasn't changed how prevalent they are across the globe. I think that would directly contradict C and A being an answer. And finally, for context that is consistent, remember the subject we're describing with our blank space is not Android. It's, in general, smartphone operating systems across the globe. So while the prevalence of them has not changed from a decade ago, what has changed? So they've already been across the globe, but then Android has employed a certain strategy that led to replacing systems all around the world. So a decade ago, I might have looked at Southeast Asia and I would have seen 10 different operating systems, including or not including Android. But if I look at them today, according to our context, I'm almost primarily going to see Android in all of these regions across the world. So our change again is not prevalence. Our change is that Android is overwhelmingly taking over the market. So when I generally describe blank of smartphone operating systems, we are going to describe the sameness or homogeneity of the smartphone operating systems. They're all Android. And that's going to be our answer here. Number 2, Balenciaga and other avant-garde streetwear. Just think like innovative, or in this case, maybe like really experimental. Streetwear can be contentious, can cause division, possibly to some extent because they appear blank to the surrounding wardrobes. Okay? Fashion historian contends that most contemporary modern clothing is self-effacing. Think like modest, doesn't stand out. But avant-garde apparel strives for spectacle. It wants to be looked at. They foreground their own stylistic eccentricity. They're really trying to push their style out there onto us, and can thus appear disproportionate when placed alongside common daily attire. Which choice completes the text with the most logical or precise word? So I think we have a pretty good understanding of the word that they want here, right? As opposed to blending into the surrounding wardrobes, we want something here that's like it really stands out. I will admit there are some really tough words here, which leads me to have to expeditiously add to the Quizlet so I can know more words in the future, and so you can too. I do think there are 2 words here that are easier. Deferential, I think that I've seen definitely on a lot of other practice material. Deferential is just going to be like really respectful to. I don't think that's going to fit because as opposed to blending or respecting surrounding wardrobes, it's going to really stand out. So we can get rid of C. In D, inextricable, I personally attach this to like being extractable because I think if 2 words are similar enough, you're fine to use that definition because again, we're not going to know all words. And it does work here. So we can say, and we'll start with the root extractable before we go to unextractable. So because they appear extractable from the surrounding wardrobes, we'll see that would work. The avant-garde is supposed to stand out from the surrounding normal stuff. So then it would be extractable. You would be able to extract it because it appears so different. So if we throw the opposite in front of it, if it was unextractable from the surrounding wardrobes, that means I wouldn't be able to extract it because I wouldn't be able to tell the difference between them, which is not the case. I should clearly be able to tell the difference. And inextricable is going to be similar. That just means inseparable from. So if it appeared inseparable from the surrounding wardrobes, that means it would blend in. But that's not what we want. We want something that means stands out here. In A, germane to, the only word I can think of to say it could be like analogous to is maybe like pertains to, which just means related to. And in our context, we can try it. They appear related to the surrounding wardrobes, which would be an antonym. That's the opposite of what we want. And that is similar to what germane means. It means like relevant to, and we want something like irrelevant. We want it as like a stark contrast to, so not that. And finally, B, incommensurate. If you knew the definition of this word, congrats. I will definitely know it going forward. Again, starting with the root, commensurate means like in proportion with, like matches to. So incommensurate would be like not in proportion with, does not match, which is 100% the type of definition we want here. We want that it does not match the surrounding wardrobes, so B is going to be our final answer here. Number 3, blanking the premise that the surge in television series in recent decades indicates an increase in narrative ingenuity, creativeness. These people demonstrate that truly novel shows, those like Game of Thrones, which did all this cool stuff, have been markedly, significantly outnumbered by non-novel shows, like really basic or boring stuff, like a sitcom that reiterates familiar tropes, right? Which choice completes the text with the most logical and precise word or phrase? I think we have a pretty good idea of what we want here. We have this premise that because there's more shows, there's more creativity. And this person is demonstrating that the actual creative shows are significantly outnumbered by non-creative shows. So they would pretty clearly be going against our premise here. We definitely also have tough words in this one, but I do think they're not as bad as the ones in number 2. In A, promulgating. So to promulgate, try to always picture it's like a mayor and a crowd. So to promulgate is either like spreading information like publicly to a group of people, or it can be like enacting some sort of law that would then affect that group of people, right? So they're not spreading this premise, right? They're going against this premise. So we can definitely get rid of A. In B, tempering or temper as a verb can be really tricky. So temper as a noun is usually a bad thing, right? Because it's like, oh, they have a bad temper. But to temper as a verb is usually a good thing. You could like temper steel. It's like a heating and cooling method to strengthen it. Or you could temper your emotions by, instead of letting them get out of hand, you're tempering them. You're like moderating them or counterbalancing them, right? Which I think that would fit perfect here. There is this premise that's spreading that is like, because more shows, there's more creativity. This person wants to counterbalance it. They want to go against that by saying, well, yeah, there's more shows, but the number of like actually highly creative shows is vastly outnumbered by the number of non-creative shows. So I think so far, this would fit perfect. In C, recapitulating. I will admit this one tricked me because I did know capitulating. This is on a Quizlet I made, which I will link down below. To capitulate means to surrender. So I guess I didn't really know what re would do to that, but recapitulating just means to summarize. So in our passage, that's not going to make any sense. They're not summarizing this premise, they're going against. So in this context, this word is not going to work. And finally, D, typifying. Maybe not that bad, right? Typifying, you could think like typical. They are trying to present the typical example of this premise, which again would be like an antonym. It would be antithetical, because that would be following with, here is a typical example of more shows being more creativity. Maybe they would say like 5 years ago, there was 100 shows with 50 creative shows. Now there's 500 shows with 250 creative shows. But they're not giving an example for, they're going against it. So we know it's not going to be D here. Just one thing to mention about number 3 again, and I can't believe I didn't see this. I was so focused on capitulating that I didn't see, well, just recap. We've all heard of like a recap of something is just a summary. So C is much easier to understand now. Recapitulating, just think recap, summary, done. Number 4, the following text is adapted from this person's memoir, something. In days long past, this person had discerned all the painters, all the muralists they knew, many being now departed or sequestered in their ailing eminence. I guess many now being either like maybe gone, like passed away, or sequestered could be like isolated in their ailing eminence. So eminence would be maybe like glory, and ailing is like fading. So they're either like passed away or isolated in their like fading away glory. She turned her studio into a gathering place for her own relations, maybe friends and family, to whom she would lament the passing of the notable times of the late 1800s, when every domain of brush and canvas was represented in France by 4 or 5 prominent names. Okay, so lament could specifically mean to like mourn or grieve something. In general, it does mean to just feel like sorrow for something. So it seems like this person in the past knew all the painters and muralists because there was only 4 or 5 like really popular names that, you know, everybody knew. And it seems like she is maybe really sad about the passing of these times when she knew all the really popular people, right? So, as used in the text, what does the word lament most nearly mean? So, we have a pretty good idea of the word we're looking for, and it's something like she would feel sorrow for the passing of these times that she enjoyed. In A, we have anticipate, which means it can mean to like predict, or it can mean like happened before something. I don't think either fit because she wouldn't be happening before something that's already happened, and she also wouldn't be predicting something that's already happened, right? And anticipate just doesn't have anything to do with like emotion or especially sorrow, so it's not going to work. In B, we have to dispute the passing of those notable times. I mean, sure, she doesn't want those times to pass, but again, lament is going to be something more like sorrow, not argumentative, so I don't think B is going to work either. In C, we have enumerate, which means to like list or name a bunch of things. So she would list or name the passing of the notable times, which without, you know, lament being here, I guess that would sound okay. But since it's a word that lament most nearly means, obviously, you know, to number things is not going to match sorrow, right? So I think for that reason entirely, we can get rid of C. And then finally in D, again, while specifically regret could be like, I wish I had made a different decision. In general, regret, the feeling of regret is like a feeling of sorrow. So to regret, to feel sorrow for the passing of these times is going to match perfectly with the sorrow felt when you lament something. So D is going to fit perfectly here. Number 5, several indie game developers recently blanked to discuss the history of this person, the creator of Metal Gear Solid. Once together, they spoke about design, narrative, and theme, right? So it looks like a word maybe like coming together. They recently came together to discuss this stuff, once together, etc., right? So down below, cited, I don't think really matches with coming together, right? They cited to discuss, I don't think fits. To ascribe would be like to attribute. So they attributed to discuss, I also think doesn't work. To convene means to come together, right? So that's going to fit perfect. And to stipulate Usually that's like if you're trying to sign a contract with someone, you would stipulate or you would specify like the really specific details that you want outlined. So they stipulated to discuss. No, they're not proposing it. They are literally coming together. So it looks like it's going to be C here. Number 6. Microbiologies address major inquiries regarding wide-ranging phenomena through narrow topics. The inquiries they pose are often blank. Distinct variants of microbiologies arose at different times in Australia, Japan, and elsewhere, for instance. And while microbiologies of the 2000s embodied the era's preoccupation with the effects of pollution, the worldwide shift in recent microbiology catalyzed a surge of internationally contextualized microbiologies. Which choice completes the text with the most logical and precise word or phrase? So I think all they're saying is these micro, maybe like studies, address big things through really specific topics, right? They're often blank. We had a bunch of different versions of this at different times in different countries. So as opposed to them all being really similar, it seems like they are dependent maybe on like the time or the place that they're taking place in, right? We also see that like in the 2000s, it was about the effects of pollution. So again, depending on maybe the time or where they are, that's the context it's associated with. And we even see them conclude it shifts recently to this surge of internationally contextualized microbiologies. So they're really trying to instill in us that this is like, I don't know, like context based, right? So looking down below, we do see some fancy language like contingent, milieu, peripheral, but I think we can try to use all of our answers together to figure out what works and what doesn't, right? So I do think this is a really useful word. We should know what this means. To be contingent on means it depends on, which is kind of similar to what we were saying, right? The inquiries they pose might depend on where they're taking place, the era that they're taking place in, right? On the scholar's milieu. So this would be a really rare word, and I think we can kind of treat it like, let's just say we don't know what it means, right? It does end up meaning like environment, context, right? So it works perfect. But I don't think we need to know this word. Already A starts off great. It does depend on stuff, right? Let's check our other answers to see if we can get rid of them. In B, they say are often controversial. We don't see any point of like being divisive or causing friction or problems. So as soon as I see controversial, I think B would be like a red flag. In C, peripheral to, so as opposed to being in the center of, it's on the edges of the scholar's discipline. We also don't see that. We don't see anything about a central or outer focus of their specific discipline, right? We also only see microbiology. We don't see another discipline. And finally, in D, it is indicative of, well, that's a good start. That's kind of like dependent on, of these scholars' ingenuity, their creativity. We also don't see a range of how creative they are, and then that would change what they're studying, right? All we see is that it changes depending on time, it changes depending on location, and that's going to fit A perfectly here. Number 7. Decades-old archaeological expeditions brought surveying tools and field notebooks to document artifacts from ancient settlements and produced large amounts of information, much of which was recorded on materials that are now deteriorating, like breaking down. A preservation project is working to preserve these records so that the information is available to this other person. So I think that's not too bad. We're just looking for a word that matches preserve. In A, we have improve. They're not trying to improve the records. They actually don't want them improved. They want the records, the information to stay exactly as it is so this person can analyze them, right? It would be similar to why B is wrong. To amend is to change. They don't want that information changed. They want it preserved as it is so it can be analyzed. C kind of falls into the same boat. To simplify something would be to change it, to take all this info and to make it into a more simple format. That's not what they want. They want it as is so this person can use it. And finally, salvage is going to be really similar to preserve, to salvage this data, to kind of rescue this data from this breaking down material into a format where this person can use it. It's going to be D here. Number 8. the financial condition of jazz performers in the early 20th century New Orleans was often blank. Yet, so we have a contrast. Achieving notable success with his initial recordings appears to have given Louis Armstrong a degree of stability that enabled him to do, a bunch of these high-quality songs. So I think our contrast is evident. Most people were not able to do what this person did. So if they were able to reach success, to reach stability, I think we can say our contrast to yet in the beginning line is that most people were not able to have like success or stability, right? So it looks like we're trying to find a negative word to kind of fit in there. So in A, we have most of them were in a precarious situation. Precarious is going to be like uncertain or dangerous. Their financial situation was uncertain or dangerous, right? As opposed to this other person that did have a bunch of success. So I think right off the bat, precarious is going to fit perfectly. In B, indecipherable is a negative word, but remember that indecipherable means like we can't understand something. Decipherable means we could understand it. It's not about being able to understand or not understand in this passage. It's about these people mostly didn't have financial stability, but this person did. They're the exception, right? So we can get rid of that. In C, justifiable. That's going to be a positive word, so we don't like it. We want a negative to contrast with this positive person's success. And again, predictable can be negative, can be positive. Most of their conditions was predictable, whereas this person was unpredictable. That's not our context, right? So we can get rid of that. It's just going to be A here.